the migration issue is so complicated. Legally, it's very simple, you know. To cross the border line without a permission is a crime. Full point, it's over. The problem is that migration is a concept of changing the society as such.
Yeah.
It's a kind of replacement of the original native-born voters with somebody else. And this is, you know, without being involved into any conspiracy theory, this is a well-detailed plan of the left. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Because, okay, my understanding of the history is probably not as sophisticated as yours, but if I understand correctly, the last 150 years of the European, including UK anyway, mm-hmm. The European politics, it's about a competition of two tribes. One is those who think that we should stay in the traditional frame and value system of Europe as it was. Nation, freedom, Christianity, that's all.
This is your daily dose of all things royal. Welcome back, my gorgeous, good-looking friends. Globalism has been a catastrophic failure. I think we're all seeing that. This is a system that enriches a tiny group of selfish, whiny elites like Meghan and Harry, while impoverishing and disempowering ordinary people across the entire West. The cultural, Marxist, liberal establishments in the EU, the UK, Canada, and Australia has utterly betrayed the citizens it claims to represent. Every policy they have been pushing erodes the quality of life, dismantles national sovereignty, and strips away personal freedoms. From top to bottom, the liberal left has inflicted irreversible damage on Western civilization in pursuit of their deranged dream of this one-world enslaved government, where the few chosen ruling class decides every facet of your life. These so-called leaders in power, they're all greedy and power-hungry traitors, in my opinion. They go ahead and preach morality and try to virtue signal from their ivory towers while they sit back and they watch their nations, their citizens, and cultures be invaded, pillaged, and identity erased by unchecked mass migration. Like, where's the morality in any of this? Where's the courage? All I see is just pure cowardice. The only answer that they have as to why things are going to hell in a handbasket is placing blame on the far right or inserting Putin somewhere in there. Only arrogance, ego, and a complete absence of empathy or critical thought is to blame for this irreversible damage all of these leaders have caused. In their blindness, they become exactly what they falsely accuse Putin of being: totalitarian destroyers of freedom. They know that they're hated, and they don't want to hear the criticism or others to know the sick cruelty they have inflicted. And this is why they're so gung-ho to drive censorship and this digital ID. This is about control, controlling how you think, controlling your behavior, and controlling the information online on what others get to see. All of these globalist elites are deliberately collapsing our societies through open borders, the redistribution of citizens' wealth, the theft of God-given rights, and the wholesale purchase of politicians and the media. This isn't coincidence. It's a coordinated assault happening simultaneously across the West. America absolutely remains under fierce attack. President Trump managed to slow the onslaught, but the fight is far from over. Traitors like Harry and Meghan, along with their circle of champagne socialist friends, continue doing everything in their power to undermine this great nation for greed. And this is why all of Hollywood backs the Democrat Party, because most of its members can be bought for the right price and are just as immoral and perverted. This is a party that has removed Christian values and replaced it with worshiping self. Like, I'm convinced that the reason why they can lie so easily, cheat, steal, and kill is because they don't fear God. And that, I believe, is because the devil is alive and well. The battle for sovereignty, culture, and freedom is still raging. And I do think that many of you know deep down inside that we have been hoodwinked by a lot of these wicked people. While Meghan and Harry may seem to be this utter laughingstock, Meghan Markle did what she was tasked to do, which was to cause chaos, sow division, and psychologically manipulate and harm people. The lies we were fed, the mockery of Christianity were all intentional, and the royal family allowed this woman in, despite knowing what she was about. Ask yourself why. Now, as I stated from the very beginning, it all ties back to Trump not getting back into office ever again. Before I made the move to post on X, I used to post a lot in the St. Meghan Markle Reddit forum, doing my best to tell everyone about the censorship, the election interference, and the involvement these two had with the US government. Unfortunately, when I did try to post some of this evidence, I was drowned in hostility. Just mentioning Trump's name was enough to trigger people to start piling on. Like, you couldn't talk about Meghan's political connections without being labeled a conspiracy theorist, off the rails, or even worse. So, how did we reach a point where grown adults can't have a civil debate without screaming, blocking, or canceling? I think the answer is simple. The radical left spent a decade weaponizing social media, conditioning entire communities to treat dissent as violence. The left was doing it under the guise of safety, but really it was about control and to drive behavior using intimidation and fear. This is how we got here, folks. Wrongthink wasn't just discouraged, it was punished. Remember, anybody that criticized Meghan Markle, you were called racist. And again, if you talked about Donald Trump, boom, your post came down. Or even worse, you were deplatformed. And that's all because these leftist bitches were all in control. And the fact that they were untouchable at that time, they were emboldened to not only incite hatred, to threaten people, all because they felt that they were in the right in the things that they were pushing. And that's how we got here. It is now starting to come to light that Obama ordered the overthrow of the United States government on behalf of Hillary Clinton after the 2016 election. The wheels were in motion to prevent Donald Trump ever getting back into office again the day after he won. When Americans voted for Trump, Obama refused to accept it. And all through the first Trump presidency, they manufactured a false intelligence narrative alleging Russian interference to delegitimize the president that we, the people, had chose.
We look at where we are now. Over the last several weeks, we've declassified and released documents that exposed how President Obama and leaders in the intelligence community knowingly manufactured a false intelligence document after the 2016 election was done, after the American people said, no, we want Donald Trump to go and be our commander-in-chief, not Hillary Clinton. And this manufactured document alleged that Russia aspired to help President Trump win the election with the aim of undermining his presidency and usurping the will and the voices of the American people who sent Trump to the White House.
So now that I have your attention, I'm hoping that many of you who have been following me are starting to put two and two together. Because when January 2017 rolled around, right before Obama left the White House, he held a meeting. And in that meeting was a member from the Cyber Threat Intelligence League, in which he told this person that he never wanted to see an outcome like this ever happen again. And they were blaming this Russian disinformation, Russian interference, Russia, Russia, Russia. The whole thing was a hoax, and Obama knew it. Thus began this witch hunt onto Donald Trump. And while they were sabotaging Trump at every turn here in the United States, there was Meghan Markle rising in parallel for a reason. And her narrative supported the social justice issues conveniently. Black Lives Matter, misogyny, everything that people were hating Trump for. It's no accident. This woman that we're calling Meghan Markle had a role that she was playing for the deep state and these Democrats. The sudden shift now, after Trump getting into office, of being this stupid influencer, after years of alignment with the Biden regime trying to fool the world on being this global advocate for everything that Biden was throwing money at, now has officially ended because the jig is up. What is now happening from Obama down, Brennan, Clapper, Comey, Rice, Lynch, Yates, Monaco, Clinton, Schiff, McCabe, Strzok, Page, Mueller, Rosenstein, Weissman, Jarrett, Rhodes, they all built a shadow coup against a sitting U.S. president. And what the media is scared to report because they were complicit with these people is the subpoenas that have started to go out. The so-called Russian collusion story that was hanging over the first Trump presidency like a dark cloud was not a mistake. It was a calculated act of sedition to reverse an election and nullify the will of 63 million Americans. And then, in parallel, you had the deep state getting ready to bulletproof the 2020 U.S. election to ensure that Joe Biden was going to be declared the winner. The lengths that the deep state went to ensure this victory for the Democrats included censoring the Hunter Biden laptop story, censoring conservative voices online. I mean, they used dead people's social security numbers to vote for Biden. And then on top of it, throw the pandemic in there and forcing people to mail in ballots. I mean, what could go wrong there with boxes and boxes of ballots arriving in the middle of the night to then be counted for certain blue states? And they think people are stupid, but at that time, you couldn't talk about the election being stolen or even bring up things that you saw that countered the narrative that Joe Biden legitimately won the election, when we all know that that was not the case. These assholes cheated, they lied, and they stole the election from the American people. And because Chris Krebs is like, yeah, we've had the most secure election in history, is why he's being investigated, because we all know that that's horseshit. They called it protecting democracy and election integrity, but they were overthrowing it, and history will remember it for what it was, a coup against the republic itself that a prince of the UK was a part of. And when you look back during the Biden regime and realize that Biden wasn't really running the country and the auto pen was, you now have to wonder who was really running the country. Was it Obama? I think the scandal to all of this is nothing that this country has ever seen in this country's history. And it explains why Obama and the left were so terrified of Trump. When I started this journey in 2021, I warned everyone. I said Trump was a direct threat to the New World Globalist Order, which the royal family are heavily entrenched in. A few years back, before the pandemic, many of us didn't know that there was this shadow agenda advancing in secret, concealed from the public by decades of lies from those in power and of influence, all funded by our tax dollars. The endless wars, the engineered pandemic, the fabricated climate crisis, the deliberate mass migration, these weren't accidents. They were tools for total control over the global population, allowing the elite to do as they please. Just after Keir Starmer became prime minister, he openly admits that this was all intentional with this mass migration.
This happened by design, not accident. Policies were reformed deliberately to liberalise immigration. Brexit was used for that purpose, to turn Britain into a one-nation experiment in open borders. Global Britain. Remember that slogan?
So these tyrants know that with control comes absolute power, which they now wield to rig election outcomes as they did with the US 2020 election. And their endgame? Well, they see AI being the one to decide for the people election outcomes, making elections obsolete, which we see that their end goal, which is global totalitarian rule, would actually materialize. They want two classes, the ruling class, who takes from the rest of us, who are there just to produce for them. And for 12 years, they were on track in doing it. You see, Trump was just the catalyst to throwing this whole agenda into a tailspin. But the real wrench for their plans is social media. That's precisely why these corrupt leaders and elite parasites despise free speech and push so hard for censorship. This is a class of entitled leeches who see themselves as above the law, free to seize whatever they want from us, our money, our children, and everything we own. Meghan and Harry's so-called shitty brand represents this sick and twisted agenda. They mean it literally when they say you will own nothing and be happy. In their eyes, we're here to serve them, and their behavior makes it crystal clear. Just look at Mr. Andrew Mountbatten Windsor. But how did we reach a point where bureaucrats have stripped away the will of the people? This didn't begin when Trump announced his run in 2015. The corruption stretches back decades, yet it accelerated sharply under Barack Obama. The NGO charity money laundering machine, originally engineered and entrenched by Jeffrey Epstein, has since been replicated across the West to siphon middle-class wealth. It's all of these corrupt NGOs who have fueled the political machine. These fake NGOs like Archwell Fugazi Public Charity, mostly run by Democrats and godless liberals, are laundering billions. Donald Trump threatened this global, corrupted to the core system that Harry and Meghan are in bed with and a part of. Elon Musk sums it up right here.
With respect to the non-governmental organizations, these sort of fake NGOs, I think there needs to be a number of arrests in that regard as well, because these are fake charities where mostly Democrats. I don't want to be clear. There's sometimes a little bit of Republican in there because they sometimes throw the Republicans a bone to say, "Hey, be quiet about this." So that's where you start getting the uniparty thing going on. Mm-hmm. But it is overwhelmingly to Democrats, and they give give billions of dollars to NGOs run by Democrats that then go through a whole network of additional NGOs. It's a giant money laundering scheme. Really, at this point, I think the word NGO and money laundering are almost synonymous.
The so-called uniparty clings to power for one reason, and that is to keep this grift alive while pretending on the surface to serve the people. It's not a coincidence, since USAID got cut off at the beginning of the year, Harry and Meghan haven't gone on any foreign fake royal tours to countries that were on Biden's U.S. list for color revolutions. Trump is one man fighting to undo nearly 2 decades of damage inflicted by Clinton, Soros, Obama, and Biden. It's easy to feel like not much has changed for everyday Americans, but remember, he's been in office less than 300 days. Reversing 12 years of destruction takes time. Time just to let us catch our breath. What we're talking about here is 12 years of open borders that flooded communities, the Obamacare disaster that crushed families with costs. We have endless wars like Ukraine that drained trillions, not billions, we're talking trillions. The climate scam that killed jobs and raised energy bills, the toxic race baiting and DEI nonsense that divided us as well as weakened us, and the quiet takeover of radical leftist ideology in our institutions. People need to understand that the rot really does run deep, and the fallout from all of this is going to hurt for years, maybe decades. We're going to feel real pain as the system detoxes itself, but that pain is not Trump's fault. It's the direct result of those people that came before him and their enablers. And let's be clear about what this is all about. This is about money. These leftist liberals don't give a damn about people or democracy. They're greedy parasites who built a global money laundering machine with our tax dollars. Through the so-called public-private partnerships and shady NGOs, they've siphoned trillions from the hardworking middle class into their own pockets and pet projects. It's the same corrupt playbook being copied across the entire West.
And his vision is becoming a reality. Reports show the billionaire has helped the campaigns of at least 75 district attorneys throughout the United States. These DAs represent 72 million citizens, or more than 1 in 5 Americans. Soros has spent more than $40 million in direct spending over the past decade to elect prosecutors using various shell organizations to execute his bidding.
Donald Trump claims Hungarian-American billionaire George Soros is responsible for interfering in the political landscape of many countries. The account claims that Soros used a hefty $260 million from U.S. aid to spread chaos, change governments, and pursue personal gain.
Soros is trying to globalize the world. But Arabella Advisors created a structure of NGOs, non-governmental organizations, and for-profit organizations, and they built it so seamless, and they used organizations like USAID. They use departments like the Department of State underneath the Obama administration and clearly underneath the Biden administration. Soros, in this briefing that I gave to President Trump a couple of years ago, we were able to prove how Soros, through this structured organization, spent $2.5 billion on our 2020 election. Okay, on our 2020 election. And I'll talk about that here in 1 second. So we actually were able to prove the flow, okay, the flow of money. Now, what they do is they do it through, again, this sort of seamless, operation where it looks like the money's coming from U.S. entities. Right. Because so I just said 2.5 billion. $1 that comes from a foreign nation, right? $1 that comes from a foreign nation is a felony. $1. All right. So we're talking about $2.5 billion that George Soros basically orchestrated to come into the 2020 election.
But these protests, they're not organic. They're not just people showing up and expressing their views. Rather, this is bought and paid for, millions of dollars. George Soros actually outlined on my podcast, Verdict with Ted Cruz. I went through the receipts, how George Soros' foundation gave over $3 million to Indivisible, one of the lead groups organizing these protests. This is bought and paid for. There's no doubt there are some very deep-pocketed left-wing socialists on the extreme left wing.
There are those who believe that we are in real time living through an assault on the constitutional order. Do you believe that we are in a constitutional crisis right now?
Yes, our democracy is at risk because Donald Trump shows that he wishes to violate the laws in many, many different ways. The good news here is we did put 235 judges, progressive judges not under the control of Trump last year on the bench, and they are ruling against Trump time after time after time.
This is clearly a judicial coup d'etat. You don't have this many different judges issuing this many different nationwide injunctions, all of them coming from the same political ideological background, and just assume it's all random efforts of justice. This is a clear effort to stop the scale of change that President Trump represents. And I agree, a lot of this stuff can be fought out. Some of it should be fought out in the Congress, but it shouldn't be micromanaging the executive branch on national security issues by random single judges who have no standing, they have no particular knowledge, they haven't been in the room, they don't know what the consequences of what they're doing are, and they put both Americans and the nation at risk when they intervene to become basically alternative presidents. You now have potentially 677 alternative presidents, none of whom won an election.
According to George Soros' own files from his Open Society Foundation, we traced over $80 million going from the Open Society Foundations to at least 54 groups engaged in crime and domestic terrorism on U.S. soil, or that are pro-terrorism, endorsing things like the October 7th attacks, or are associated with foreign terrorist organizations or explicitly pro-terror groups. And this is according to his own files, so it's rock solid. And over all of that amount, over 23 million went to at least 7 groups that are doing things that meet the FBI's definition of domestic terrorism, including rioting and things like that. I mean, it's really stunning. And some of these groups are coalitions. So when I say 54 groups, just one of those might have 300 entities in that one. So it's actually, the real number is actually much higher.
Matt Palumbo is the author of The Man Behind the Curtain, Inside the Secret Network of George Soros, and joins us now. In that New York Post cover, it had George Soros on the top, the most dangerous man in America, and then Adam Klotz. We want to be clear. It is not Adam Klotz. It is George Soros. So, Matt, walk us through the money trail that you found linking George Soros to these very, very far-left DAs.
Right. So, I mean, the thing about Soros is, and it's sort of ironic that, us pointing out any money he spends is sort of chalked up as a conspiracy theory. But, Soros's Open Society Foundations, all his money, all his donations is public. So it's very easy to trace. And, Soros has been involved in our politics for many decades. The only silver lining has been that he spent tens of millions in presidential elections that he's mostly lost. But he's gone local in the past decade. He's had more than a 90% success rate in getting a lot of these DAs elected. And, I hate to use the term brilliance with Soros, but one of the brilliant things he realized is, when you want to get policy reform done with law and order, and in this case, degrading it, going through a DA is so efficient because you don't have to go through a state legislature. You don't have to go through a mayor. You just back someone with millions of dollars who's going to do what you want. And that's what he's done, across the nation. In fact, they're all largely interchangeable in terms of the crazy policies they implement. They seem to really view criminals as the real victims in any situation. They're very supportive of the defund the police movement. And there was sort of this 1-2 punch in 2020 where we have them not enforcing the law and then also supporting cutting police. One sort of underreported fact, I think, in 2020 was that even before the defund the police movement resulted in a single police officer losing their job, the U.S. actually employed about 30% fewer cops per capita than the world average. So we were cutting on top of being below the world average, and the consequences were impossible to ignore. It's very seldom the case that a policy can blow up in your face this quickly. But in 2020, while there was a nationwide crime increase, it was the most pronounced in these Soros jurisdictions. You saw a near doubling. And then there were some crimes that, the lack of enforcement even changed how they're getting reported. So violent crime skyrocketed. That data is very reliable. But, in San Francisco, you can walk into a CVS, steal $500 and walk out, and nothing's going to happen.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that
Matt,
doesn't
really
get
quickly,
reported
before
at
we
all.
let you go, I just want to ask, what do you think is motivating George Soros to spend his money the way he does? Do you think he's actually a believer in these liberal causes, or is it something else?
Well, that's the thing. There are certain, Santa Claus, Bernie Sanders type policies where you can think of liberals naive and means the best. I just cannot find a theory for why anyone would think these policies work. I hate to give the lazy answer of the guy is just evil, but there's not even really a moralistic spin on this one. So it's really all I can think of. Maybe he sees, there's benefit in chaos and reshaping the country from that.
Joe Rogan called him like a Batman villain.
Of USAID funding Antifa. Do you recall exactly which NGO it was funded through? Okay, and has that been a recent revelation?
Yeah, it was within the last, I don't know if it was Antifa, but I know Black Lives Matter. And keep in mind, they're one and the same with a lot of what happened during 2020.
Well, there's crossover, certainly.
Certainly.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
We've covered a lot on this show about what happened.
The other thing that USAID funded were these radically liberal prosecutors who will not prosecute certain crimes or certain people. So George Soros put in $14 million. USAID put in $17 million to get him elected.
Was that in collaboration together?
I don't know if it was
just separately?
All I can tell you is that's some of the information that has come out from Doge.
Is that still happening? Not from USAID, obviously, but from Soros.
Funding the prosecutors?
Yeah.
I believe so. I mean, that's why we got Alvin Bragg in New York City. It's why we ended up with the gentleman in both San Francisco and Los Angeles, Gascon, and what was the other one, Chesa Boudin. Both of them, one was recalled, the other one was not, but he did lose his reelection last year. The gentleman in, I believe it's Baltimore, Maryland, is another one of the prosecutors that has refused to actually prosecute crimes.
The Democratic Party is now controlled, as I said, by the Marxist activists, dark money donors. This is not a grassroots effort. And an anti-American ideology is dominating this. And they would rather destroy the system than to lose power.
And I think what's really important to understand here is that this is not an isolated case and where this is only happening to the United States. I am willing to bet that this same setup is going on in the UK, it's going on in the EU, it's going on in Canada, it's going on in Australia, and so forth. Now, just because USAID has been auditing its spend as well as evaluating and looking over these charities now, doesn't mean that this network is going to go away or these billionaires are going to stop funding groups that are going to continue to keep trying to take down and destroy the West. These demons are really trying to get the system to collapse so then they can go in and implement this one world government that they have been striving to do by 2030, which is a couple of years away. And currently, right now, the United States is standing in their way. And that's because America's strength is with the middle class. And what has been going on over 12 years that Obama and Biden had been taking down this country? Weakening and stealing from the middle class. And the whole point of that is to get more people dependent on the government. Because when you have people who are dependent on the government, they're easier to control. This isn't politics anymore. It's straight up treason and theft. Harry and Meghan couldn't have been more blatant. Every cause they championed during the Biden regime lined up perfectly with wherever billions of taxpayer dollars were being funneled. Suddenly, Meghan was passionate about Afghan refugees, women and girls' health, and fighting misinformation. Exactly the same buckets the Biden regime was dumping cash into with zero oversight. It wasn't compassion. It was a treasure map for these greedy assholes. They didn't care about the people. They cared about that pool of money attached to them. Follow the grants, the NGOs, the public-private partnerships, and there they were, smiling for photos, collecting awards, and quietly positioning themselves for the next payout. Classic grift, dressed up as virtue. They really are the royal grift. Let me go ahead and show you how this couple and their satanic cabal of friends contributed to this destructive agenda, all for greed and control. Having power and being worshipped is a hell of a drug for some, and we know that Meghan can't get enough of it. Remember how this jackass would show up for those staged photo shoots with Afghans and Archwell posting about refugees strolling through parks under the so-called Welcome Project? While the gullible public swallowed it whole and parroted the nonsense, a few of us saw right through it. The way that this program was spun was that Meghan Markle jumped into action because she had been there before with the success of the Hub Kitchen after the Grenfell Tower fire. Of course, no mention that this was the palace's idea, and she was successful because of the unlimited resources the royal family gave her to be successful. Oh no, the ungrateful bitch couldn't admit that, but instead had the Archwell spin doctors say, the Archwell Foundation mobilized quickly to partner with Team Rubicon and Welcome US to help address the needs of families resettling to the US, which can be particularly challenging when it comes to accessing education, employment opportunities, and healthcare services. As efforts continued, the Archwell Fugazi Public Charity heard repeatedly about the intense social isolation women in particular were experiencing. With a belief in the power of connection and a goal of uplifting communities, the Archwell Fugazi Public Charity launched the Welcome Project in 2023. Now, this is important. It goes on to say that the Welcome Project supports women-led programming for recently resettled Afghan women. Recently resettled Afghan women. They're very specific here in who they are serving. If we go back to the first impact report that Archwell Fugazi Public Charity put out, the 2021-2022 report, they specifically write here that we wanted to ensure those fleeing were met with a warm welcome. AWF provided a grant to Welcome US in support of their work mobilizing a refugee response and to provide direct assistance to agencies working to properly welcome and resettle these families. As the largest coalition in evacuee resettlement history, Welcome US has spent the past year supporting our new Afghan neighbors as well as those fleeing conflict in Ukraine, welcoming a total of 174,497 people here in the US. So going back to the Archwell Fugazi Public Charity 990, it's showing that Archwell gave a $250,000 grant to Team Rubicon for this evacuation and resettlement of the amount of families that they have listed there, which is 853 families. Sounds noble, right? So I'm pretty sure many of you are thinking the same thing that I'm thinking at this point, which is there's a high possibility that Harry and Meghan didn't just give $250,000 of their own money out of the kindness of their hearts, right? You know, if Harry and Meghan weren't so dishonest and deceitful, this thought wouldn't have even crossed my mind. But because they are, we know that they're driven by money. And Meghan doesn't do anything unless she's getting paid. And in this case, all the projects and all the grants that they have made to certain causes to pretend that they care, all are tied to the Biden administration and initiatives where billions of taxpayer-funded money had been allocated. After the failed withdrawal from Afghanistan, which I'm starting to believe that it was intentional to leave people high and dry, Biden had no choice but to access emergency taxpayer funds and request from Congress additional billions of dollars Americans just did not have.
Here's one that I was entirely curious about, and maybe you could explain it to me. $3.5 billion transferred to the Afghan fund that is tended to protect the macro financial stability on behalf of the Afghan people? What the hell does that mean? Can you tell me? I don't know. That's a bunch of gibberish to me.
Happy to address all of this, Congressman. Thank you.
I'll give you one more
okay.
before you address it.
Please.
Even worse, by the numbers, we've spent $9 billion to resettle 90,000 roughly Afghan refugees here since the fall of Afghanistan. My simple Army math tells me that's about $100,000 a person. That's absurd. So my question for you, we do not even have an embassy in Afghanistan. We have no diplomats there. What are we doing giving them $1?
So, Congressman, as I believe you know, the money that we provide and the international community provides is done through partners, implementing partners. UN agencies, NGOs. They have.
Yes, we could say that about all the State Department dollars, foreign NGOs, foreign countries, foreign companies, and in this case, foreign adversaries.
So each of these institutions, as verified by the department, has in place processes to make sure that the money that we provide and others provide is spent appropriately. And the money that has been spent in Afghanistan, and I think internationally it's about $8 billion since the evacuation, has helped avert famine. It's helped prevent the collapse of the health system. It's helped prevent the collapse of the entire economy. It's helped avoid bringing even more disaster
Mr.
on
Secretary,
people who are suffering.
You know for a fact that people literally, especially outside of this country, they directly lied to us. Your people had to come back and correct, hey, it turns out we were in fact spending $500,000 to expand atheism in Nepal through the third-party implementer of Humanist International. They were lying to us. They didn't show us the exact slideshow that they put together for $500,000 and all this. They lied to us. We have no eyes on the ground, and I would simply close with this. We do not even have an embassy there. We have no business putting $1 into that place.
The Biden State Department program launched in Q4 2021, dangling billions, and the fiscal sponsor was Rockefeller Philanthropy Advisors. And that's going to be important to know later on because they are the fiscal sponsor for the Welcome U.S. coalition that's in partnership with the U.S. government. So hold that thought and shift our attention for a minute. Now let's talk about the woman nobody was supposed to notice and forget about when she left. And that would be Mandana Dayani. Raise your hand if that name still rings a bell. For 18 months, the Sussex PR machine paraded her as the grown-up in the room. Chief Operating Officer of Archwell, the one supposedly running day-to-day operations for both the for-profit media arm and the all-important Archwell Fugazi Public Charity. You know, their fraudulent 501c3 tax-exempt organization. Here's the part everyone conveniently missed. When the IRS filings finally happened, Mandana Dayani was nowhere to be found on the charity's list of officers, directors, or key employees. 0 hours reported, 0 compensation listed, nothing for any of the years that Archwell had filed. So who was she actually working for? Because if Mandana Dayani was never actually on the payroll of the philanthropic Archwell Show Up and Do Good Foundation, the one that's been suspiciously cagey about exactly where its millions come from and where they go, then what the hell was she doing there? We're left to connect the dots ourselves until the IRS finally does its job. And those dots are starting to form a huge neon sign. This is the same Mandana Dayani who co-founded I Am Voter, a get-out-the-vote machine that funneled bodies to the polls for Biden in 2020 and Kamala in 2024. This is the same Mandana who magically materialized at Archwell Fugazi Public Charity the instant Biden's people started spraying $10.7 billion in taxpayer money across public-private partnerships for Operations Allies Welcome. And then there's the smoking gun nobody in the media wants to touch. Mandana Dayani sat on the leadership council of Welcome.us, the same exact refugee resettlement slush fund launched in September 2021 by the unholy quartet of former presidents, Marxist puppet Obama, treason adjacent Clinton, warmonger Bush, and Jimmy, not the worst anymore, Carter. This wasn't some feel-good charity drive. Welcome.us was the front door for Biden's multi-billion-dollar Afghan and Ukrainian resettlement bonanza. Billions in taxpayer cash handed straight to NGOs with zero oversight, zero vetting, and zero questions asked. And who do you think helped with the laundry and funneling of that cash? Well, none other than Archwell's COO, right alongside Soros-linked operatives. I mean, technically, her title at Archwell was head of operations, so I guess she was doing her job. And the way I see it, and this is my opinion on what really went down here, is while Harry and Meghan were cosplaying humanitarians and begging the world for compassion to show up and do good, their hand-picked operative, Mandana Dayani, was sitting on the Welcome.us Leadership Council, quietly having a say which NGOs and Archwell got first dibs on that multi-billion-dollar geyser of taxpayer cash. What's really interesting to me here is that Harry and Meghan set up this welcome project in 2023. But this evacuation of these Afghans happened at the end of 2021, and the resettlement actually went on into 2022. So if Archwell was mobilizing, why did they wait till 2023 to set up this welcome project? Well, could be that after Operation Welcome Allies was over, they needed the next grift to continue to keep the funds coming in, which naturally, with all of these illegal invaders coming in, Welcome.us became not just for Afghans anymore, it's for newcomers. That's what they're calling them, the newcomers. And in my opinion, Archwell wasn't just a grateful indirect recipient. It was literally acting as a toll booth. Every glossy photo shoot of Meghan hugging Afghan women in hijabs wasn't charity. It was marketing collateral. Those soft-focus community images of smiling Muslim refugees were deliberate propaganda, crafted to normalize the very demographic replacement the billions were bankrolling. Pure activism cosplaying with a six-figure operational overhead skimmed off the top for the Sussex's Fugazi Public Charity. And yes, Mandana Dayani, a Jewish Iranian American, was right there helping to steer the ship. Doesn't matter if she sees the end game, which is Islamic transformation, wealth redistribution, and open borders forever. She's just another useful idiot collecting substantial checks. The pipeline doesn't care about her feelings or beliefs. It only cares that she delivered access. So really, how much of those billions actually trickled down to affect the refugee directly? And how much actually vanished into thin air over administration fees, private jets, PR retainers, and offshore consulting gigs? You know, all those shell companies Harry and Meghan have set up have to be for a reason, right? Let's walk through what likely has gone on here, not only with Archwell Fugazi Public Charity, but for the rest of all these grifting NGOs. We're going to use Archwell as the example. This is how I suspect some of that tax money flowed into the hands of Harry and Meghan. You see, under Operation Allies Welcome, the government cut about 4 contracts. Those organizations were the International Rescue Committee, or IRC, the U.S. Committee for Refugees and Immigrants, or USCRI, the Lutheran Immigration and Refugee Service, and then you had the Jewish organization HIAS. On top of that, you had Rockefeller Philanthropy Advisors, who was the fiscal sponsor for Welcome US. Despite how it's marketed, these really weren't charities. They were passed through vaults. Each received hundreds of millions, then immediately subcontracted the real work like housing, food, cultural orientation, walks in a free park, to a daisy chain of smaller NGOs and for-profit vendors. All the while, they hype up for-profit companies for donating from their own funds, making it seem like pure-hearted generosity when we all know that cash is really flowing from another charity fund pipeline and matching grant scheme. They also gave money to the fiscal sponsor, which was Rockefeller Philanthropy Advisors. And that's how NGOs do it. They're like 3 or 4 layers separated so they can keep their hands clean. So it is possible that Harry and Meghan received an ungodly amount of money that went into one of those offshore accounts or shell companies. Then they put some of that money into DAFs, to which it was then given to Archwell to be seen as like a donation. And then Harry and Meghan issued their grants. And if you notice, those grants, they're very small in value. And the whole point to doing that is to not trigger the system with large grants in areas that you don't want to be scrutinized. Like take, for instance, the NAACP. Sure, Harry and Meghan probably make good on that $125,000 that they give every year for the digital justice. But for this little operation of giving $27,500 in those exact amounts to these various small organizations for resettlement, yeah, I think something's fishy there. And this is why we need reform on these NGOs to put more governance around it, because they've legitimately figured out how to lose the trail of money and make it so complex that you can't trace this money going back to our tax dollars. But the secret's out. In some way or some form, I am pretty sure that all this money that Harry and Meghan have been throwing at these charities came from the taxpayer. And I would be curious to know how much did they really pocket if they were receiving funds indirectly in this whole NGO network scheme. Because that's how it's set up. They wouldn't be doing this if there wasn't profit in it. And while I understand that we're frustrated that Archwell needs to be investigated by the IRS and we keep telling them over and over to do it, you have to understand how large this network of NGOs are. We're talking about 1.8 million foundations and charities that have 501c3 status that's tax exempt. I really do think that they need to do a better job at selecting who gets these tax exemptions. But the fact that there's so many of them, I guarantee the IRS is pretty busy these days in trying to sort out who should be tax exempt, who is doing the right thing, and who is committing tax fraud. I mean, it's like here we see it. We see that there's something funky and fishy here, and they definitely need to be looked at. What I find truly, truly infuriating is the amount of money for decades that have been stolen from hardworking people. People in the United States, people in the UK, people in Canada and Australia and the EU, the whole entire West, and all these demons that want to enslave us have been literally redistributing all the wealth. And Ukraine is a perfect example of that. Now, I know that this video was long, but I needed to go through how we got here in order for you to understand what was stolen from us and why the people that you see on your screen were doing everything in their mother to ensure that Donald Trump did not get back into office. It's because of the money. and the power and the control. You know, with all that's going on with socialism, spreading throughout the West, because that's exactly what they're driving here, I think it's only appropriate that if we're going to go down the path of socialism and eventually into communism, and it would only make sense to seize the wealth and assets of these assholes and share it among the people. I mean, it is ours anyway. The last thing that I want to say is, if you made it this far, thank you for sticking it out. I know it's not the easiest topic to listen to, but it's definitely important because this is what's happening to everybody. And this is what people like Meghan and Harry have been doing. And I get that we all love the royal family, but they're also doing it too. Sure, they have good PR and they can spin it, but they're equally in this system. And, you know, I think people need to start looking at that a bit differently. It's just my opinion. But, you know, the last couple of days and putting this video together, I mean, yeah, it took longer than usual because it's a lot to take in. And there were some other discoveries that I am not comfortable sharing right now with everyone. But it does get worse. And yeah, I don't want to be the one who is breaking bad news. That's all I have to say. But what do you guys think? Definitely leave your thoughts below. As always, I will be back with more content. But until then, please be safe, and I'll talk to you later. Bye.
Such a fraud.